Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here for another frequently asked question, which of course is going to go into my full playlist of frequently asked questions that I will link in the description box down below for anyone who'd like to check out that list and see if there's any other questions that you are thinking of that I might have already answered in those. So this one is in regards to leaving the bands or putting the bands on your jars when we're talking about dried goods. And I understand why this question is coming in, because a lot of people hear, oh, you're never supposed to leave the bands on the jars when you're canning. Well, that's in reference to canning. And I did do a video actually about a year or so ago about when it is and how it can be appropriate to put the bands back on your home canned goods. We're talking pressure canned, water bath canned in that way. But you do need to make sure they're clean and dry and make sure they're only put on very, very loosely. But these are not water bath canned. These are not pressure canned goods. And as a result, there's a definite difference in using the bands or not. Now, if you're vacuum sealing your jars really well, there's no need to put a band on the jar. But I always do whenever I vacuum seal anything or not vacuum seal it, because just like with anything else, you're going to get some jars that maybe you didn't pull a strong enough vacuum on it. Like this one's real good. It's been back there. Well, this is actually from 2021. Here's a better example I'll show you right here. Jalapenos from 2015, still sealed. But there's always going to be those ones that maybe when you were vacuum sealing it, you didn't pull a strong enough vacuum. You tested it and it was sealed, but it wasn't strong enough to keep it sealed, or you were vacuum sealing powders and didn't put that barrier there and it came unsealed. I've had that happen with peanut butter powder before I got in the habit of putting the barrier of cloth. You can use coffee filter or paper towel if you want. I always use a cotton cloth that I just recycle. But anyway, you can come across those ones that have come unsealed, and if you don't have the band on there and you don't know, let's say you grab that powder out of there and you have the band off and it came unsealed, and you did one of these numbers not realizing it had come unsealed, you're gonna have a big old mess for one. And plus, by putting those bands on nice and tight, that way, if for some reason, if it does come unsealed, at least I still have a tight fitting band to keep the lid tightly against the jar itself, the rim of the jar, so that will help keep it airtight in the event that happened. Because in the case with the peanut butter powder, I had not put the bands tightly on all those jars, and so what happened, because I felt it was not necessary because they all sealed, but then the ones that came unsealed in storage, without that band to hold it tightly in place, it caused the upper layer of the peanut butter powder on those to go rancid. Thankfully, it was only the upper layer, the part that was most exposed to oxygen. But the ones that stayed sealed, I didn't have that problem. All the peanut butter from the top all the way down to the bottom was still good. It was not at all rancid, which is why I do like to vacuum seal everything, even though it's not actually necessary for all your dried goods. Here's an example, like with a lot of your herbs. It's not absolutely necessary to vacuum seal your dried herbs, because even if the seal gets lost, the herbs can still be good. And I'm using this jar as an example because it's not a jar that I lost a seal on. It was a jar that simply had been forgotten about because I was starting to keep it in here. And I was working through this. This is actually from 2017, and it is a mixed blend of herbs from my garden for teas. So I don't even remember what all is in here. I know for certain there's peppermint in here and yarrow, but I was putting all kinds of different mints and various different herbs in here for a tea. And I came across it the other day because we're going to be redoing all this up here, and it was buried to the back of that cabinet. And so I decided I'd try it out. It still has a nice, wonderful smell and flavor. Still very powerful, even though it's been sitting back there unsealed for at least 5 years now. And it's still good. Now, one of the reasons I get this question a lot is because with canned goods, the reason you don't want to put the bands on tightly is that if for some reason, and I need to make sure you understand, this is actually pretty rare that this can happen, but it can happen, is if it comes unsealed and you have a tight band on there, what it can do is cause the lid to create what's then called a false seal, which means it might when you go to take the lid off, it might seem like it's sealed, but it's not actually sealed. But it's tight enough on there that it's preventing oxygen from getting in there. So if it lost its seal and somehow botulism got in there, and then it kind of created a false seal by this nice tight band on there, you'll never know that botulism was in there because it has no flavor, it has no appearance, and it has no smell to it. So if as in the case of these chanterelle mushrooms that I had recently vacuum sealed but did come unsealed in storage, if I go to pull this off and it still kind of feels sort of like a tight seal, and this was a canned good, you know, pressure canned or water bath canned, then I won't know that there could be possibly be botulism in there. But if there's any air, by leaving the band off or putting it on very loosely will allow a seal that has been broken to not, it will prevent it from taking on a false seal, but also allow air to get in there so that mold will grow. And then you'll know for certain that that canned good has lost its seal somewhere along the way and it needs to be tossed. But when we're talking dried goods, that's just simply not an issue. Just like with this tea that's been sitting back there in the cupboard, it's unsealed, and it's still good. There's nothing wrong with it. That's going to be the case with any of your dried goods. Now, since these are mushrooms, I do want to make sure I vacuum seal these again. I'm going to reseal them, and then I'll check it again in a few days. So that's another reason why it's a good idea to check all your stuff in a few days. Some stuff won't matter, but things like mushrooms, it's not that they'll spoil. If they're fully dried, they're not going to spoil. But I did talk about this in another video and went into more depth, and I'll go ahead and link to that down below. I do want to keep them as fresh as possible, and mushrooms are one of those things that can turn stale if they're not vacuum sealed. So I'm going to reseal that. They'd still be good. I could still use them in soups and stuff, but I want to keep them as fresh as I can and to preserve the quality of them for as long as I can. Now I could go on more and more about jars, lids, and all that, and vacuum sealing and so on when it comes to dried goods, but I'd rather you go check out the other video because I already went into a lot of information there. So please make sure you check out in the description box down below. Click on either show more right down here, or if you're on a smart device, right over here, that little gray triangle you'll see, or arrow, and to open up the description box so you can find that link and any others I feel that you may want to see, like how to use a brake bleeder pump for vacuum sealing and so on. I'll put that down there as well so that you can learn more about vacuum sealing, and also I'll put the one I did on oxygen absorbers and why I don't use them. I never use oxygen absorbers when I'm vacuum sealing, and I explain all that in that video as well. And to just recap real quick, when you're talking about dry goods, bands go on tightly, but when you're talking about water bath or pressure canned goods, then you either need to remove the bands completely or put them back on clean and dry and very, very loosely. And again, I'll link to that video where I went into more detail on why in some of my jars I do put the bands back on and how I do it. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Any thoughts and suggestions or more questions you have, please put them in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Take care and God bless.